Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us on CELPIP Live Season 2. We start all our episodes with a trivia question about Canada, so here is one for you today. What animal is on the Canadian 25-cent coin? Again, what animal is on the Canadian 25-cent coin? Let me know the answer in the comments below. You can also share this image on your Instagram and hashtag CELPIP and we may feature it on our feed. I will reveal the response towards the end like I do always. But for now, let's start our show. So if you're new here, hi. CELPIP Live is an interactive YouTube series made to help CELPIP test takers understand a little more about the CELPIP test. If you're about to write the test, please subscribe to our channel and click on the bell icon to be notified as soon as we go live. In today's episode, we're talking about common English mistakes. We have a fun panel of guests here today who will be helping us learn more about a few common mistakes we all make while speaking. So today's episode is more about day-to-day conversations. More than anything else, in this segment, we are just trying to understand what is confusing about these words and how we can remember the difference. So let's go to our main segment. So, like I said before, today we have 3 guests with us. Some of them have joined us in season 1, but let me go around and give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. First, my name is Ashwati. Hi, guys. I'm the host of CELPIP Live. Next, we have Ian. Ian works with us and has so graciously joined us today. Ian, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi. So as Ashwati said, I work at CELPIP, and I also have a background in English teaching, particularly in Japan. I lived there for about 5 years, and I've worked with students in Vancouver from all sorts of backgrounds, studying ESL in Vancouver. A lot of those students went on to universities and other travel and adventures. So very excited to be here today.
Next, we have Luke. You guys, I'm pretty sure already know Luke, but for the new guys who joined us, Luke, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. It's great to be back. For those that maybe don't remember, my name is Luke. I also have a history of teaching ESL. About 6 years teaching in Ecuador in South America and in Halifax, Nova Scotia on the East Coast for about 4 years before I moved to Vancouver. It's really great to be back. Looking forward to the show.
Wonderful. And of course, our local celebrity, Brandy, is also here with us. Hi, Brandy. How are you doing?
Hi, Ashwati. Hey, Luke and Ian. It's really nice to be back as well. It's been almost 2 months, I think, since I've seen you. So we're here to welcome the fall season that has fallen on Canada. Today's our first day of fall. And I'm just happy to be back on CELPIP Live to talk about some common language mistakes. So thanks for having me back.
Perfect. I also love fall, so I'm really looking forward to the weather now. But let's start talking about common mistakes that we make. And the first thing that I wanted to talk about, it's a little hard, especially if people know more than one language. Sometimes it can get confusing. Wrong word order for questions. Brandy, I'm going to ask you to start this one because firstly, I think people should know what I'm referring to in the first place. So I'll let you begin. But something that I see, I've done it myself. I've seen a lot of people asking the way they frame their questions can get a little confusing for people. And they don't know how to answer it. So Brandy, you can go.
Absolutely, yes. So I'll start off with just a simple practical example. So when we make a statement, we usually start, if we're talking about ourselves, we're going to use I, right? That's me, I'm the one doing the action. So if I say to you, I can help you practice your English, I'm making a statement. So I'm starting off with I, the subject, and the verb I'm choosing is can help. All right, this is the order that we use when we make statements. When we ask questions, though, all we need to remember to do is just switch around the order of the subject and verb. You're going to flip and put your subject in the middle. So instead of saying, I can help you, I'm going to say, can I help you? So if you can just remember to rotate two little words, you're changing your statement into a question. And you would do that with a lot of questions that you ask. Just a simple word order thing where the subject goes in the sentence. So.
Great, thank you. Luke, did you have anything to share as well?
No, I think that was excellently put. Again, it's interesting the more languages that you are familiar with and where you see this more, because my experience in Latin America with Spanish, definitely where the sort of subject pronoun is not always necessary. And so it is all about your intonation that shows that you're changing from a statement to a question with no real change in conjugation. It is tricky, but thanks for that example, Brandy.
Ian, I wanted to hear your thoughts on this as well. You are muted, Ian.
Thanks. Like Luke said, different languages don't have this requirement, so that can be very tricky. In Japanese, for example, you can make a full sentence just with the verb, and you can leave out the subject. So it's often implied without saying you. I can just use the verb and a question mark kind of character, and then it's clear that I'm talking about you without including a subject at all. So that can be very confusing in English, where we always expect there to be a subject.
Okay, just because I want to understand this a little bit more, can you give me an example of how it might sound in English? Like the verb.
So if you were to ask the question in English using Japanese grammar, it would just be something like go.
Oh. Huh. So I just quickly went through all the languages I know, and I was trying to see if there is a similar thing, but I haven't found one. If you guys know something that is similar to your language, please comment below. Okay, thank you so much. We're going to go to our next confusing word. This is wrong preposition. Okay, this is something that I have also had trouble with when I was learning, like when I was just beginning to learn English. A lot of it is, when do I use on? Even for this, like even sometimes when I'm talking about CELPIP Live, do I say see you on the show, see you in the show? So this can get a little confusing for a lot of people. And so I just wanted to know if there was an easier way to remember this. Again, Brandy, this time I'm going to start with you as well.
Yeah, you know what? Prepositions, those are those little small words that usually give us information about time or place. So on, in, at, to. Most of these words are just so short, 2 or 3 letters long. And the really frustrating part about learning them is there really aren't any rules in English that are going to make it easy for us to know when to use each word properly. So really, this boils down to a memory game. So we have to become familiar with which preposition is used in the phrase for that situation. You just have to, I guess, read it, write it, speak it, and hear it enough times to really remember. So I know we were talking about this live on air, right? Right now we're on CELPIP Live, but we might say in next week's episode, stay tuned. So you're constantly changing the preposition based on the situation. So there are hundreds of prepositions in English. So I would not advise anybody to go out there and start memorizing lists of hundreds of words. Can you imagine how frustrating, boring, and so on that might be? So pick and choose a couple of really common ones and get really familiar with them first. I think on and in are very commonly used, and probably at and to. That would be my list. I would say take those 4, look at how they're used, and just start memorizing those phrases. You have to practice them, whether you're speaking or writing them out. That's how you're going to remember. So we can't just listen and read. We need to actually productively use that language. And don't get frustrated. Easier said than done, I know. But hang in there. It takes lots of time to learn how to use these words effectively. So keep practicing and it'll get easier as you go, I hope.
I mean, like in Hindi and I think in Arabic as well, one of the things that we have to, and I'm pretty sure this might be the case with French, I'm not fully sure, we have to memorize genders of things. So the chair is a specific gender, the lamp is a specific gender, shoes, so on and so forth. And, you know, people who are comfortable with the language get them automatically. But when I was learning Arabic, it was so hard. There was no, why would a chair be female versus male? It was a little confusing for me. So this is a little bit like that. I mean, this is what the first thing that popped into my head was that example. So Luke, did you have anything to add as well to this?
Yeah, prepositions, again, it's one of those things where it can take the longest. It's and with good reason, because a lot of our language that we learn, we absorb from listening, but prepositions are not content words, and so we slide over them. We don't stress them. They're not going to jump out in a conversation. So because they tend to not be important to the meaning of what you're trying to say, it can be a lot harder to pick those out and remember them when you are practicing. So again, as Brandy said, using those kind of high frequency situations and building on those. What are the most common, your ins, ons, ats, to, and getting really comfortable with those before kind of noticing and asking questions about times when you see other ones pop up.
Huh. Interesting. That you raise a good point, Luke. You know, a lot of these, I picked up most of my English language through reading. So, you know, as much as I tried to like learn new words and keep up my vocabulary, I always skipped on the prepositions. I didn't even think of it as much as I would think of, like, if I saw a new word and like, oh, what does this mean? So yeah, that's a good point. Ian, I'm looking forward to your thoughts as well.
One tip I would say is that children's books are very good for learning prepositions. So I'm here in my kid's room right now. So I just grabbed a book, very easy to take a look and go through a bunch of prepositions really quickly, like in a box, with a fox, in a house, and so on. So that could be something that's pretty easy for anyone to pick up. You might feel a little silly reading a kid's book at first, but it will take you through a lot of prepositions, and it just repeats over and over and over. I've read this book a few hundred times every day, so I'm getting pretty good with my prepositions now. That's what I would recommend.
That is great. And thank you so much for showing a book. You know, that's a good tip. I also, like I was telling Luke, I used to read a lot of books, and I would read anything. Like when I was young, I was a kid, I read my dad's book, which was like The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. I didn't understand a word, but I read it because I wanted to read books. And, you know, if there was a children's book lying around, I would have read that too. Also a little offended that you called Dr. Seuss silly. Dr. Seuss is not silly. He is a wonderful, I mean, of all the things he's written, at least, I love his books. And that's a really good tip. Thank you so much, Ian. Okay, so let's go to our next commonly confused word. Oh, wait, sorry. Before that, we have a question from our comments. What is the difference between statement and sentence? Brandy, do you want to take this?
Yeah, it's actually, there's not much of a difference at all. So when you think of a sentence in English, it's a group of words that convey meaning. And when you're making a statement, that's what you're doing. You're putting words together to form a meaning. Statement and question are two different things. But yeah, you can use words like sentence, statement, phrase, idea. They're pretty much the same thing, as long as you've got all the content words there so that we know what it is, the idea is that you're trying to get across.
Great. I hope that answered your question. Thank you for asking us questions. By the way, you can ask us any other questions about commonly confused words in the comment section, and I will get one of these three celebrities to answer it. Okay. Our next confusing word is countable versus uncountable words. Luke, I'm going to have you start this time. How do I remember when I'm supposed to use lesser versus fewer, so on and so forth?
Woof. I guess there's a reason that we have these common mistakes and confusing things in English. If we're sort of strictly focusing on lesser, fewer, then we think about, and these are again, these I would say are errors that native speakers make, and sort of as language evolves and changes, we care less. If you want to use it correctly, which maybe should still be the goal, then we would say fewer when it's something that is countable, and less when it is uncountable. So if we're talking about liquids or things that can change in size, measurable things. Sorry.
Yeah, I always think of things like wine. I enjoyed a nice glass of red wine last night with my supper, so I had less wine last evening because it was a work day today, right? Because wine is not countable. But if you had, what would be a drink that is countable? Are there any?
Well, I guess the challenge is that as you get more comfortable and flexible with your language, then you can say I had fewer glasses of wine than I normally would.
Right.
And so learning those, you can adapt your language to change almost anything from countable to uncountable.
Right.
Oh, that's interesting. So if I wanted to talk about bread, because I'm in this no carb diet, and this is the first thing that popped in my head, how do I say that I'm cutting out? Like, how do I say that I'm eating less carbs? So do I say I'm eating lesser bread, fewer loaves of bread? How would that work?
Yeah, so bread is non-count. And it's funny, like Luke says, again, English is my first language, so automatically I know that bread is non-count. I can't say breads. So what I have to do is I need to think of a word that is plural. It is countable, and the word loaves works. So now I turned bread into loaves of bread. And as soon as you do that, you can use the correct word in front of that. So I had fewer loaves of bread because I'm sadly on a low carb diet, Ashwati.
Yes.
Yeah. I suppose at the same time, if we wanted to talk about bread kind of as a general term, then I'm eating less bread.
Okay, that works too. Okay, that's kind of also what I wanted to know. So I'm eating less bread works too. Ian, jump in whenever you like.
I think it also depends how people normally eat it. So you would count muffins because people usually sit and eat one whole muffin as one piece. But I don't usually see people pick up an entire loaf of bread and start eating it. So if it's something that's usually divided up, there might be a countable, a way to count it.
Oh,
right?
That's interesting.
One slice of bread you might eat.
So it is interesting, if I can jump into, again, in Spanish, often, because bread is countable, and so you would say I had two breads. But in this situation where what you visualize, what you think about when you talk about that word that translates as bread, it's not a loaf of bread, right? Whereas when in a North American diet, when we talk about bread, immediately we jump to a loaf of bread, white bread, as opposed to a dinner roll, which would be more similar to kind of the general concept in.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's where it becomes very cultural as well.
Very interesting.
It's complicated, isn't it? It seems like it would be simple, but it's really not when you stop and think about all of the ideas that we've just shared, and in different language, and looking at it from a different cultural lens too. It's interesting to have that perspective, I think.
It is because sorry, Ian, were you saying something?
Oh, I was going to say also when you go into a restaurant, the rules can change because the shop might sell things in a compact package. So you can go in and say, I would like a coffee, like one coffee, because the shop sells it just in a cup. But coffee is a liquid. So if we're pouring it, you would say some more coffee or less coffee. I've never said less coffee though, so.
Good point.
That's right, because you would say 2 cups of coffee, but sometimes you might say 2 coffees, please, right?
Right.
That's become acceptable. And I think Luke mentioned this earlier, the way we use language, it changes too over time. So if I went into a coffee house and I ordered 2 coffees, they'd know what I meant, and that's acceptable to say, even though I'm taking that concept and sort of turning it into my own countable noun, because most of us do that, don't we? Yeah, great example, Ian.
I think if it's a menu item, then it becomes countable.
Like the serving suggestion. Okay. So just to, because, you know, we wanted to like unconfuse these people. So like, just to remember, if it's countable, fewer is used, or yeah, fewer is used. And if it's uncountable, you use less. And for things that are commonly uncountable, like rice or water or sunlight, I guess, if you have a measure of counting it, like if you have glasses or if you have cups, and then you can start using fewer, because then it becomes countable. So if you have any questions about this, do let us know in the comments below. We have another question here. What is the difference between neither and either? Luke, Ian, Brandy, I'm going to leave anybody, one of you can answer this.
Sure. So it's basically used in a negative or a positive light. So neither is kind of a tricky one, and we often use it with the conjunction nor. Now I'm going to try to think of an example off the top of my head. You know what, let's just simplify it. If I said neither person was in class today, that's a negative in the fact that they were not there, and neither refers to the 2 people to whom I'm speaking, I guess, right? If I'm using either, I'm giving a choice. So I might say either I will go to math class today or I will go to English. I'm not going to do both. So I'm using that more as an option. So it has to do with the meaning or the purpose for using these words in the first place. So neither, more of a negative, either, more of a choice. That would be one way to look at it. Maybe toss it out to my gentlemen colleagues and see if they can add to that.
Yeah, I guess I would say, so when we use it in that way, in that kind of more common context or formal context, I guess, where it is either this or this, and neither, not one or the other. I would say I used to get questions all the time about when you're just agreeing with somebody who says, oh, I really don't like Tim Hortons coffee, for example. Me either, me neither, which one's more appropriate? And so those come up maybe more often than I would say I like neither Tim Hortons nor Starbucks coffee, because one of those is false anyway. But yeah, I would say that in terms of the like me neither, me either, it almost comes down to personal preference now. I'm sure me neither is more correct, because me either having 2 of the same sort of vowel sound is a bit awkward, but we do it.
Yeah, like neither in that case, if nobody likes it, again, it's that negative idea. So neither is technically correct. It's the best grammatical answer to choose. And then as an English teacher, I'm always one for the rules. So I don't like Starbucks coffee, me neither, because I don't like it. It's a negative.
Got it.
So that's sort of how those 2 pair together. But again, as Luke says, you have to always remember the formality of your conversation. So if you're standing in a lineup with your friend and you're talking about coffees, we don't always observe these rules with such strictness either. So sometimes, oh, me either, you know, it has been said it's becoming perhaps more acceptable conversationally, but I would still try very hard to observe the rules as they were established.
Thanks for that, yeah.
One thing that I just wanted to remind the guys who are watching is, of course, we're talking about this in a day-to-day conversation, and we are talking about this in the context of you talking to your friend in English and learning, building your English language, you know, proficiency. So this is not to discourage you from talking. Please go talk and like do converse. And at the point when you catch yourself using either instead of neither, you will remember why one is preferred over the other. And that is what we're trying to encourage. We're trying to have you kind of like remember these things and then kind of clock yourself when you're doing this mistake. And then the next time you speak, you will have a little bit more clarity. Ian, did you have anything to add? Sorry, I interrupted the flow.
No, that was great. Yeah, I think when you encounter these tricky things, it's always good to pick a speaking partner and then just pass the ball back and forth so you really drill it with a conversation. So you can have a friend alternate saying something they like and something they don't like. So, you know, I like coffee. I don't like, I don't know, Luke doesn't like Tim Hortons coffee maybe. And then your friend can respond with me too or me neither, whether it's positive or negative. And just keep passing it back and forth with a partner so that your brain and your mouth get used to giving those common responses. Probably me too, me neither is a really useful and common thing to use in conversation. Okay.
So just to summarize, negative conversations usually follow neither, and then either is more for positive conversations. I don't know if you guys shared it. Is there an example for when I can use me either as a response to somebody's question?
I'll defer to Brandy. I think so.
I'm trying to think of a good example now, and it's really tough sometimes on the spot.
Oh, no worries. We can always come back to it.
Sure, yeah.
First of all, great question, Dainty. Thank you for asking this question. And Brandy, if you think of something, we can come back to that, of course. Okay, so we're going to move on to our next question. Meanwhile, you guys, if you like this episode, please do give it a thumbs up. Okay, let's talk about double negatives. We have heard a lot of double negatives. You know, it's become very popular in popular culture. Double negatives is used a lot. But grammatically, I've always known that it's kind of wrong. Like, you know, even when we used to use it in school, our teachers would kind of like, you know, correct us and reprimand us for using it. And I know that, you know, in a lot of language tests also, you're obviously not allowed to use it. So let's kind of like talk a little bit more about that. Brandy, I would like you to start this time.
Yeah, so again, it's almost matching the correct words together. So let's start with a negative action. So something that we don't want to do. I might say correctly, I might say, I don't want, if I'm scolding a child, I might say, I don't want any trouble from you today, right? So I'm matching up the negative don't with the other word any. That's the correct way to do that. Sometimes what happens is we confuse these words. And since we've started with the negative, I don't, our brain is already there and we continue to use all these negative words like no, not, and so forth. So when we say, I don't want no trouble from you, in our mind, that makes sense because it's a negative thing we're trying to stop. But that's where we go wrong. And Ashwati, you said this, you almost recognize something's wrong and we have to learn how to correct that because that's really awkward language. When we speak that way, it could confuse your listener. So when you start with that negative don't, get in the habit of pairing that automatically with the word any. I don't want any trouble. I don't have any time to study. I don't enjoy eating anything that's green, that sort of thing. So don't and any are two very commonly misconstrued structures anyways, that if we pair them together correctly, it's great, but we don't want to add more than one negative concept in the sentence because you sort of undo, you're almost saying then the opposite of what you mean. So these ones are tricky. There is an acceptable way and a wrong way. So we want to make sure the listener understands us. So we do have to pair the words together properly. Otherwise, yeah, it just doesn't make any sense.
Great. Ian, Luke, did you have anything to add?
I hesitate to say this because, again, the general context of the way that we speak, yes. Brandy, 100% correct. But just in case your exposure to the English language is kind of current with Twitter of the day, there has been a big sort of trend of seeing double negatives just as that sort of emphasis. So if I don't want to say, so I hear this all the time from my partner. I hear this like, well, I'm not hungry. Mm-hmm. I didn't not like it. Where it's just to give that extra emphasis. So it's a much more sort of niche, small usage of it, but you may encounter it. It's not your everyday sort of speech that would be appropriate to use, but there is space for it.
Yeah, I would. That's definitely true. I've seen that around and heard that from people, Luke. For people to keep in mind, I guess, is thinking about mathematics, where negative makes a positive. So for English speakers, usually it becomes a little bit confusing. If you have two negatives, then it changes the meaning to something positive. And math, I'm pretty sure, is the same in every language. So that should be easy for people to keep in mind.
Excellent tips, Ian. Love that. A little bit of math in English. Who would have thought? It's like my worst nightmare, but okay, it's fine. It's a great tip. Thank you so much. So if you guys are watching, that was a really good tip. Double negatives, negative and negative, and then positive and positive. So just think about that next time you're talking to someone and you accidentally use a double negative. I mean, they're not going to tell you anything because it's a conversation, but this is just for you. Ian, since I have you here already, we have a question from our audience. What is the difference between would, should, and could? And when do I use each of them correctly?
Wow, that's I have to think about it a little bit, but it's a little bit about obligation. So if there's something that I have an obligation or a duty to do, that's something that I should do. Could is more possibility without obligation. So I don't have to do this thing, but I have a possibility. And then would gets would has a lot of different uses. I'm not sure how to answer that one exactly.
I thought so when you were talking about this. Sorry, I'm interrupting you. Also, there was a little bit of disturbance. I apologize. I was just thinking, because you said would, you explained should and could so well. And then would was almost like, when I was trying to make sentences, would was almost like interest or wanting to do something. Like, would you be able to do that? Or I would like to do that. So that was kind of what my thought was, that could is more ability and would is more choice.
Is it fair to say maybe that would is almost, it's not quite a conditional, but it's something that you're wanting to do, but it's not a definite plan yet. So we would say will, that's a future tense word. But if I know for certain I'm going to do something, like next week, I will run around the seawall. I know for sure I'm going to do that. But if I'm not 100% certain, then I need to soften that language and choose the word would. I would like to run around the seawall next week. But if it's raining, I might not do that. So I think it's partly the definitive commitment that you're making when you set up these actions. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, that's a good point. Definitely used with conditionals. And so if you're saying, I would go running, it sounds like there's something more coming. Like maybe there's a problem with that or some hesitation. Like I would go running, but the air is very smoky from forest fires. So I don't think I will.
And we actually, also, sorry, Ashwati, go ahead.
No, the way Ian framed that question, that sentence really made sense to me, because I would go running, but I don't think I will. So like that made sense to me, because that's the use of would and will right there in the same sentence, and kind of like emphasizes the difference between them. Would is more like a decision and will is more like a sure, like 100% thingy. Anyway, Brady, continue.
No, I was just thinking too about formality. So whether we're speaking or writing, oftentimes we choose the word would when we want to soften the tone. So if we're being more formal and we're addressing our manager, a coworker, we would say things like, I would like to ask if we could have a break early today, right? Instead of saying, I want a break early. So this is a completely different usage of this word. We're no longer setting up conditionals and so on, but when we say I want, we sound demanding. and it's considered rude oftentimes in Canadian culture. To soften that tone in business correspondence, we just use the word would instead. I would like to request a meeting today. So that's just a slightly different usage of that word would. And if you do a lot of business communications, I think especially you'll probably encounter that particular usage more so. I recognize, again, today we're here to talk about day-to-day English, so you might not be too focused on that, that rule, but it's just something to think on. Even when you're talking to someone, if you'd like them to do something for you, it's nice to soften and be respectful in that request. And you'll often see would being used there specifically to soften your tone, so you don't sound demanding.
Luke?
Yeah. Again, these, because there are so many different contexts that you would use these in, I think if we're talking about asking somebody a favor, would you, could you, it is, as Brandy said, kind of you're softening, you're making your language less demanding. It is sort of gentler, but you also have to acknowledge that, you know, each of these sort of modal verbs is used in a variety of contexts. So I can use could to say, could you do me a favor? But I can also use that same word to talk about an ability that I had when I was a child. You know, when I was young, I could hold my breath underwater for 1 minute. I can no longer do that. So identifying kind of the purpose for these modal verbs and the situations is very important.
I'm going to throw another word into this mix, and let's talk about can. I can and I could. So Luke, you can talk about this if you're, because you were continuing your conversation anyway.
Yeah. So again, I guess what is our context? We use can to talk about permission. We use can to talk about ability. We use can in that same way that we kind of politely ask for a favor. You know, can you help me? So it will depend on kind of what your purpose is. In those sorts of situations, if I'm asking, generally sort of looking at can being a more present, simple sort of structure, and we tend to, when asking sort of for a favor, politely maybe move back to that could you help me versus can you help me. Just shades of politeness, maybe. I don't know if Brandy or Ian want to weigh in.
For sure. No, it's degrees of politeness, as you say. I think oftentimes we have to consider who we're speaking to. As you say, who's your audience? How are they going to perceive what I'm saying? How are they going to take what I'm saying? As well as your purpose behind it. I mean, you can get right down to a simple way to distinguish can and could is just verb tense as well. So can is present tense and could is past tense. So you could pick and choose those words depending on if the action you're talking about is happening now. Like, can you sing a song for me now, please, right? Go ahead, Luke. And I'm just using, please don't. Or could, as you mentioned earlier about, you know, you could hold your breath when you were a child. That's something that's happened in the past. So again, you're picking and choosing your words based on the time frame in the conversation that suits your meaning the best, I think. Yeah, so much to think about. Verb tense, purpose, audience. Yeah, there's lots of rules. So we can see why English is certainly a challenging language to learn, isn't it?
Okay, sorry to keep beating this poor dead horse, but I have one more question, like one more thing that people often get confused with, and one thing that teachers enjoy correcting is may and can. So like, can I go to the bathroom versus may I go to the bathroom? You know, ESL teachers, have you corrected anybody, or like, do you have anything to share?
This, I think, is just, it's more of a very tired dad joke. I remember this when I was in elementary school, and so it's just dripping with sarcasm because we commonly say, can I go to the bathroom? And you'll hear, I don't know, can you? And so this, because it more carries, you know, does carry more the idea of ability, more so than permission. And as language has changed and evolved. May is the more correct phrase for asking for permission,
Yes.
but it almost sounds too formal now. So I wouldn't question if somebody said, "Can I do something?"
Okay. Ian?
Oh, I think Luke nailed it there. It's politeness, but generally people understand and accept. Can I? And as a tired dad, yes, that's a joke we make.
Perfect. So thank you for these questions, guys. You guys are nailing it with the questions, so please go ahead and ask more if you have any more confusing words. So Ian, since I've asked Luke to answer some questions, Brandy, I'm going to ask you this time. Let's talk about types of greetings. So especially something that I see when I'm writing a letter. I mean, we are talking about speaking today, so we'll focus on that. But one of the examples that I had in mind was when you're writing a letter, do I say hi? Because, dear is another thing. Like, people use a lot of dear when they're like saluting someone, and that's great. But like, if we're talking about greetings in terms of like hi, hello, when do I use hey? When do I use hi? When do I use hello or what's up? Or, how do we recognize these words as being formal versus informal?
Right. So if you're talking to a friend or somebody you know quite well, then hey is acceptable in both speaking and writing. When we write emails anyways, we tend to be doing so because it's a fast message we want to get across, and they're usually informal and more casual anyway. Certain people you work with, you know them quite well. So if I'm writing to you later today, Ashwati, I might say, hey, Ashwati, how are you doing? And that's fine. But if there's a new person on the team that I haven't met, I myself, this is my personal choice, I wouldn't say hey, because I don't know them yet. And that's just a little bit too casual or informal. So it's a little more respectful to err on the side of caution and address strangers with more of a hi or hello. Those are casual everyday words too, but they're a little bit more formal than hey, right? So hey is the absolute most casual you can get. Hi and hello are polite, and you can use them, of course, when you're talking to friends, family, and your colleagues as well. So we do use dear in certain situations, and I think this is also quite a cultural thing as well. So the word dear, I'll maybe ask the panel too for your opinion. The word dear for me signifies something that my grandmother or grandfather would say to me. It's got this meaning attached to it that has become almost a generational thing. It's a bit old-fashioned. So if my grandmother comes up and she says, oh, hi, dear, would you like to have a cookie for dessert? That's normal. But it's a little bit odd. It would be very strange if a peer, a colleague of mine, approached me and said, hi, dear, what can I do for you? It just seems generationally, it's odd. And also, there's almost an intimacy that goes along with that word dear. We save that word for people that are very close and near to us in our hearts. So again, that's usually more for close family members, perhaps a really close friend. But it would actually make me uncomfortable if a colleague in my age bracket came up to me and said, hi, dear, how are you? That would be very unusual. And I mention that because I have seen this in correspondence with different students that I work with from around the world. So I do recognize it is acceptable, I'm assuming, in other cultures maybe, to use that word as more of a normal interaction. But in Canadian culture nowadays, I don't think it's the best one you could choose. Save that one perhaps for the older generations. What do you think, gentlemen, Luke or Ian?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Dear is starting to sound a little old-fashioned. I would maybe use it when I'm addressing a new business contact that I've never met before. But often I think hello is accepted. And then once you get to know people, a casual hi or even hey is common in the business context. I would also say I have a lot of contacts in the United States, and I've noticed that they often use no greeting at all, just name and comma. And I've only seen that from people that I work with in the US. So I think that might be something that's culturally a little different between the US and Canada.
Interesting. So, Ian, I know what you meant when you said using dear for business contacts, but I just wanted to clarify it for our audience. You mean in terms of writing a letter or like emailing them. Isn't that what you meant when you said dear? Okay, so
yeah.
dear so-and-so and dear.
And I understand that might come up on a CELPIP test, for example. So if you were to write to someone in a professional setting, I think it's still appropriate if you've never met the person to use dear. It's formal and it starts the letter off on a good note if it's someone that you've never met before. But for my colleagues, I would say I probably never use dear for a colleague that I know.
Okay, great. That was good. A lot more clarity on that for me, at least. And so we have another comment here about on behalf of versus in behalf of. So, you know, I'm not sure which was the right one. I think it's on behalf of, but I'm going to defer to you guys. Luke, did you want to just double check that for me?
That is absolutely correct, Ashwati. On behalf of.
Okay, perfect. So that's just simple. It's on behalf of.
Yeah,
in behalf of is.
Yeah, that collocation. Those are the words that go together, and so you'll notice that the more you expose yourself to language and read and hear, those will be the words that will go together. I'm writing on behalf of my friend or my colleague.
Perfect. Okay, our next word, and this is also something that I have seen a lot of people do, and I don't even know which one is correct or wrong. Tell versus say. So, you know, sometimes people say, people tell. You know, sometimes people talk about like sentences, and when they refer to something like, you know, she said or he told, or even something like, can you tell me or can you say me? How do we remember which one to use at what context? Brandy, would you like to go?
Sure, yeah, there are a couple of rules there, but one that I find the easiest to think about is when you just said yourself, I think, Ashwati, I told you, or I forget your example, we'll just go with that. So I told you to set the table, let's just pretend. All right, so I'm using the word told there because I have an indirect object associated with that. I'm telling the person, which is you in this case, right? I told you to set the table. So whenever you're using that word tell or told, which is past tense, you're actually putting that object there. We have to know who you're telling or what you're telling, I guess. When you're using say or said, you don't have that object. I wouldn't say, I said you set the table, right? That would be wrong. So I'm going to rephrase that and just say, I said, set the table. So we're using that word say or said when we actually have a reported speech. So when I start with I said, and I pause, I'm then going to say out loud what it was I said earlier. I'm reporting to you what was said. All right, so I know I explained that in a roundabout way. So just to summarize again, told goes with your object, said does not. I told you to set the table. I said, set the table. So that's one of the sort of easier rules I find helps me, or hopefully helps somebody who's learning the language, remember when to use which word. Think about who you're talking to, or if you're just reporting back what was said earlier. So that should help with said and tell, I think.
Great. I understood that. So if you guys didn't understand, please ask us in the comments below. Luke and Ian, did you have anything to chip in?
No, I think that was exactly right. That's certainly the simplest way to remember that. If you say something, you're just putting it out into the air, and you don't really care. The emphasis, the focus isn't on who it was for. It was the words that were said, and so we report those.
Oh yeah, good tip as well.
Want to go back to prepositions very quickly, I can say, well, I said to you that I don't like Tim Hortons.
Oh so my God, we're really here with the Tim Hortons hate today.
Any of my past students will know that this is a common example of mine for grammar purposes. But all that to say, you can sort of add that preposition to make it correct. And I don't want to complicate or make anyone overthink. But if you have sort of begun to say, I said this, and and you are referring to your indirect object. You are referring to the person that the message is for. You can add to him or to her. I said that I didn't like that to my sister, my friend, my boss.
Got it. Okay. So let's, unless you had anything to add, I was going to go. Okay, cool. So our next word is do versus make. And when do we use do versus when do we use make? Luke, did you want to start this one?
Sure. No, Brandy?
There's maybe one rule that will help clarify this. And remember, I'm going to preface this with English is always full of exceptions. So we can't just memorize one rule and expect all the words to follow that rule. So there will be exceptions. But one maybe simpler way to remember is we're going to use do when it's the action we're talking about is more of an obligation, a chore, a responsibility. So I do my homework. It could be like a task that you do every day. That's almost menial. Like I did my nails, I did my hair. Women would say, I did my makeup, I do my homework, I do the budget, and on it goes. So all of these sort of chore obligations, things associated with do. One really important exception that I would ask you to memorize is the bed. We don't do the bed, we make the bed. So that making the bed is a chore. I made my bed this morning, as a matter of fact. So we do that hopefully every day. We're using the word make there for that one. The rest of the time we use the word make is usually associated with plans that you're making, but they're more things you're choosing to do. We're focusing more on the result. So I make plans on the weekend. I made some good friends in my class. I made lots of money at my job last year. So all of these more positive result-oriented outcomes, things that we choose to engage with, we're using make. Okay, and again, I'm sure there will be exceptions. If we really sat down and all started looking at these examples, we might find words that don't quite fit that general guideline. But yeah, for the most part, do, it's a chore, make, it's more fun. And that helps at least to get you started thinking about how to put these words together.
I'm just going to jump in and say I was more accustomed in teaching to hear kind of that challenge of using sort of play, go, or do as the verbs that go with activities. So normally when people ask questions about do, I'm accustomed to associating that more with kind of leisure activities or things that we do. So when I think about do, it's interesting when you talk about obligations, Brandy, but you think about the types of activities that we do. When I do my chores or I do my homework, these tend to be activities as well that aren't strictly defined by one thing. So if I say I did my chores, that could be vacuuming, doing the dishes, laundry. It's a large list of things that are sort of encompassed in that. I did my homework. Maybe it was an essay or a workbook exercise. So it also tends to be used for those kinds of activities.
Yeah, I had thought like, yeah, I did the laundry, I did the dishes and all these things, right? So I did the chores as a group, and then you start to really break it down and look at the individual activities that you have done underneath that umbrella term. Yeah, that's a nice way to think of it for sure.
Yeah, for make, I guess you often have a recipe where you're taking separate pieces and then putting them together. So making coffee, where you have water and ground coffee beans, and then you're putting them together. Making a sandwich. Maybe I'm just getting hungry. All my examples are food and drink now. I think make, you're taking separate things often and then putting them together to create something new. And that seems to work even when we're talking about things that aren't food, like making friends, where you take two separate people and then they come together to something new and beautiful.
What a great example. Love that. Okay, so I'm going to, actually guys, today's episode is a hit. We have so many people tuning in with so many questions. So I'm going to ask a few questions from the audience, and then we will quickly wrap this up. Thank you so much for joining us, by the way. We have someone in the comments asking us the difference between anybody versus anyone. So who wants to take this? Luke, Ian, Brandy? Luke, it looks like Luke wants to take this. Yes.
Okay, I'll start the ball rolling. Please jump in, because often these sort of specific questions are not things that we think about all the time. I think there are a lot of situations definitely where you could use them interchangeably, that they would both be acceptable. Can anyone tell me, can anybody tell me, has anyone gone to that restaurant? Has anyone, anybody? In a lot of cases, I think they can be used interchangeably.
Okay, great. Ian, did you have anything to add as well?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I second what Luke said. These are always, this is what I always enjoy about teaching, is people ask these questions. I go, oh, that's really interesting. I never think about that. I don't have an immediate answer other than I think I use them pretty interchangeably. So I'm very excited to see if Brandy tells me that I'm using them wrong now.
No, I agree. I'm not aware myself of any rules that tell you you have to use anyone or you have to use anybody. I've always used them interchangeably, and I'd say it's acceptable too. I think the people, like when we speak or write, it comes down to a stylistic choice. So the individual person decides if they're more comfortable using anyone or if they're more comfortable using anybody. But the meaning is pretty clear, or is the same, I should say. It would not matter grammatically which word you chose.
Perfect. Thank you so much, guys, for really, like, you know, especially since this is a live and people are asking us questions. Thank you so much for clarifying our doubts. Apologies for putting you on the spot, but such is the life of show business. Okay. Sorry, Ian, did you have anything to say?
Oh, I was just going to say one really good trick, and this is what I was trying to do just now, is trying to think of a song where those words are used. So the first one that came to mind was Queen, Somebody to Love, right? So the question, can anybody find me?
Brandy, you have your request answered. Ian actually sang the song today, so that's great. But Ian, that's a wonderful example.
A little off key, but you know, I didn't have time to prepare.
Hey, that's fine. It's the English and the tips that count. So great. Thank you for, you know, like, honestly, guys, like, this is why I really like ESL teachers, because they really put in the work. Like, if you have to sing, you will sing. If that means that a person will understand the example better, so be it. So great. Thank you so much, you guys. Before I let you guys go, I wanted to know if you guys wanted to take a stab at our trivia question today, which was, which animal is on the Canadian 25-cent coin? Did anybody want to answer this?
Oh, from us?
Yeah, you guys.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
Ian wants to go.
Do you guys know?
Oh, Brandy can go ahead. I think she hit the buzzer first.
I think it's the caribou.
Woo!
Am I right?
Okay. You are right, Brandy. It is the caribou. You guys who are watching, I know that one of you commented caribou. So congratulations, you got that right. The difference is in the antlers. So the confusing animals are moose, caribou, and elk, because that was also one of the popular choices here. And the difference is that moose, the antlers of the moose is flatter. So it's literally like flat, like a plate. Not a plate, but flat. The moose antlers are flat and then are wide as well. Elk antlers are long and they have more branches coming out of them. And caribou antlers are more defined. So if you look at a caribou from the side, you will see that its antlers forms a C. So that's the difference between moose, caribou, and elk antlers. A little bit of trivia, a little bit of giving back for all that you guys have given us today in this episode. So thank you, Luke, Brandy, and Ian, for joining us. I hope you have a great rest of the day. Yes, Ian, did you have anything to say? Sorry.
Final trivia. Do you know the difference between caribou and reindeer?
One of them rides Santa Claus's chariot.
Exactly. That's the only difference. Minimal.
Okay. Great. Yeah. Who knew I was good at trivia? Okay. Thank you so much for joining us. You three, really fun episode. A lot of people here are also really glad for having you join us today. We certainly did clear quite a few doubts. So thank you so much. Bye, guys. Okay. So we can now move on to our CELPIP news updates. Okay, we have something exciting to share. You all must be familiar with our CELPIP stories. These are stories that CELPIP test takers shared with us about their journey, how the CELPIP test helped them with their journey, got them a step closer to achieving their goals. So if you haven't seen these videos, I will link them down below. But the exciting part of the news is that we opened this platform for everybody. So if you want to share your CELPIP journey with us and be featured on our YouTube channel, you can do so with this link. So I will share it in the live chat, but I will also add it in the description later on. If you want to inspire other CELPIP test takers with your success story, please do send in your application. If you want to see how we had done it previously with other CELPIP test takers, there is a link for that in the description as well. Do check it out. I'm so excited to hear you guys' story. It's always inspiring to hear another immigrant story because I was also an immigrant. I still am an immigrant. I'm still here as an immigrant. So yes, please share your stories with us. The link is in the description and in the live chat as well. Now, the second thing I wanted to talk about was that many of you have asked us about free products. I will link our previous episode. Chris, who also works with us, did a great episode on free products. I will link them down below. But a few important ones that you can remember are that you always have a free sample test on our CELPIP website. It's free even without you having to make an account or registering for a test. As soon as you go to the CELPIP website, you will be able to try a sample test and see if it works for you. But once you make an account, you also get a free practice test. And then after you actually purchase a test sitting, you will get 5 hours of CELPIP Accelerate for free, along with registration. So a few of you have asked us where to find this. Once you make a registration, we get this question a lot in communications@paragontesting.ca. And I just want to let you guys know that when you receive your confirmation letter, read it completely, like your confirmation email. In that email is where you get information about where to access your 5 hours of CELPIP Accelerate Starter. Okay. We are also getting questions about open centers and testing dates. The CELPIP.ca website is your best bet. We list all our open locations and all the cities and countries we're testing in over there. Please bookmark it and check it thoroughly for updates. I will also link that below. We also share stories on Instagram about last-minute openings across all our CELPIP test centers. So that's another place for some useful CELPIP information. And that's it. Thank you for joining us and subscribing to our channel. If you found this video useful, please like it and share it with anybody else you think might find it useful. Our next episode will be on October 6th with Brandy, and she will be sharing yet another lesson with you. So if you have questions that you asked us here in the comments, don't worry, Brandy will be there to answer it on October 6th. If you want to see more episodes like this, like the one we did today about day-to-day conversations, please let us know in the comments below and we will try and prepare one for you. You can also connect with us through any of our social media channels. All updates will be posted there first, so please follow us there. I also like engaging with you guys over there, so if you have any questions that we weren't able to answer today, you can also send me a DM there, and I will make sure that it's included in any of our future episodes. So until then, please stay safe and don't forget to wash your hands. Bye.